Hello, everybody, especially those who persevere, because sometimes it pays off. This is Brian O'Haron with episode 16 of Spreading the Word. You can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. But if you try sometime, you just might find that you can get what you need. Well, the public hearings are over. We had one for the totally rewritten P&Z regulations, and that was extended. There were 2 sessions for that. And then we had the one for the application, backed by 220 signatures or so, plus a lot of people who wouldn't sign but would tell us what their problems were, to try to get Section 10.6 put back into these new regulations. It was removed on July 22nd, 2016, at a hastily called meeting with very few in attendance. And then after the public hearing during the regular meeting, they canceled it. That got everybody's back up, got their attention. We started the petition. I started these programs. We're now on number 16. That means it's been 16 weeks at least. A lot of people went in and talked to the town manager, to the land use director, and anybody else they could talk to. They kept grabbing us around the lake whenever we walked or went anywhere, even downtown, telling us all about their feeling about the whole situation. But the public hearings are over now. Tonight, I'm going to be playing for you the voice-only recording because there was no video recording, and I didn't take any pictures because I thought I had enough pictures of the planning and zoning meetings. So I'll be playing this voice recording so you can hear what happened during this Section 10.6 application public hearing. That lasted about 40 minutes or so a few nights ago. It was followed by a regular planning and zoning meeting where they discussed the major changes recommended to the new, totally rewritten planning and zoning regulations at the public hearings. They discussed that, they contemplated the changes, and then they made a decision to approve the planning and zoning regulations. I'm not playing that for you tonight because it lasts too long. It's about an hour and a half or so, and I don't have that kind of time. So you'll get a good idea just by listening to this, what's happening here.
Okay, next item on our agenda is the public hearing Zoning regulation change, return section 10.6 of Town of Winchester zoning regulations. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, it looks to me to be 7:08. Do you have the official notification?
Yes, it was in the Republican American, the 10th and the 17th. It looks like legal notice, Winchester Planning and Zoning Commission, notification of public hearing. Notice is hereby given that the Winchester Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing on Monday, October 24th, 2016 at 7 p.m. in the P. Francis Hicks Room, 2nd floor, Town Hall, 338 Main Street, Winstead, for the following application. 1. Michael Ham, applicant, zoning text amendment, Chapter 10, non-conforming building structures and uses, return of section 10.6. At this hearing, interested persons may appear and be heard, and written communications will be received. Copies of the above amendments are on file for public information. The Planning and Community Development Office and Town Clerk's Office dated this at Winchester, Connecticut, this 22nd day of September 2016, Craig A. Sandin. And it also was sent to the neighboring communities and to the COG, and the COG wrote back that they have no concerns on this either way.
I will state that we're going to limit our exposure to 5 minutes each. We'll time it. And does anyone on the commission have any desire to make any expression? Then I throw it open to the public for any comment concerning the reinstatement of this 10.6.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Sadowski, and Michael Ham, 405 West Wakefield Boulevard, here in Winchester. Mr. Chairman, I would object to your 5-minute limitation on speaking in this hearing. I never heard of a time limitation on free speech.
Unfortunately, I feel that this item has been well discussed and your pertinent points are going to be well taken and we will listen to them.
I still will do. Thank you.
The applicant probably can go longer than that. It's the comments. I don't think you want to limit the actual applicant. Thinking that might not be a good idea. The applicant
Sure
himself.
call.
Yeah.
Sure, Paul.
So we're eliminating the limit on me, or? as the
Yeah, because you're the applicant, yeah.
30 seconds instead.
Thanks. Just begin with some modifications to the applications. More signatures, 16 copies. Can pass them out to the members. I'll just begin by saying that I have made application in my name simply for the legal process and the representation of 223 concerned citizens and property owners in the town of Winchester. Thank you. Of which 92% of those are Town Lake District. And as we've stated in our application, we feel that this removing as it was done was not a thing for anyone to accomplish anything in our community. We've been without it now since June. In the absence of this regulation has the potential to devaluate properties, lessening the revenues to our community, as well as reducing potential sales value. And the demonstration of the commission, it offered no interpretation by legal counsel of the commission for its removal. In our eyes, demonstrates a bias of the commission and the majority against small lawnmowers from improving the properties. Now, the other thing I just want to mention is I haven't been copied on what's been come back from the COG, but I am privy to getting a copy of it. I was a little disappointed that I haven't seen any of the information that's come forward from the application being sent to the state or what's been sent to NECOG and what has come back doesn't really follow the direct language of 10.6 as it was entered into the record in our application. And I don't know if you guys have got a copy of what came back from the COG. If you do, I think you could just kind of open it up, take a look at it. Excuse me.
Mickey, is that something new, or, because I don't have a copy.
I don't have a copy.
I'm not quite sure what you're talking about.
Well, in the process of this, the application gets one sent to the state for their interpretation, and it gets sent to the COG for their blessing or non-blessing of what the application. And I shouldn't say blessing because it's, again, an interpretation of what this commission wants to do. I think it's important that, it is to me at least, because I've seen language that came back from the COG that wasn't submitted as our original application.
What do you mean?
Well, our original application cites 10.6 as it was written, and the COG is brought back in their referral. It indicates that the proposed change returns section 10.6, which allows non-conforming buildings to be enlarged or altered as long as it's for permanent use, and does not increase the number of housing units, and does not increase the non-conformity. Now, the last statement, does not increase the non-conformity, is not part of the language of the original 10.6.
Well, maybe that's a state change by court order. That's why they added the language.
Well,
Because
I don't believe that's the case.
Well, you need to talk to the state then, man. I mean, because you go to New Britain to the law office down there, and when I was taking the zoning classes, I had to go to that office and pay $125 for the changes to the zoning regs because of Supreme Court cases.
Steve, do you have a copy of what was actually submitted to?
Your application.
All right.
It's just your application.
So I was just referring to their summary of the proposed change. And the last phrase that's in there indicates that, and it does not increase the non-conformity. That was not part of our application or the original template.
And I made the statement, Steve, that maybe Supreme Court hearings added that and changed it from the law library in New Britain, where you buy all the zoning regs every year.
But shouldn't that be referenced here in the COG letter?
Why would they reference it? Why would they say that? It's a state statute. It was a state law that changed. That's why they put it in there. If somebody wants to go and pay $125 or research it.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the same. She just worded it differently. Or not nearer to the lot lines in the existing building. It's basically what she's saying. She just reworded it.
But the last phrase, it says, and does not increase the non-conformity.
Right. You're not getting closer to the lot lines
My
than
concern,
the existing building.
Okay, well, my concern in this is that based on the fact that when you adopt your new regulations, and if you choose to re-adopt 10.6, and if you read the new regulations, 10.6 comes back into effect and does not increase the non-conformity, that's basically what 10.6 allows you to do, is increase the non-conformity. So it's contrary to what we're trying to, our objective is we're trying to think. It eliminates, we've got nothing. 10.6 comes back with that phrase in it, nobody's got anything. You got less than you had before.
But that's exactly the language that was in there before.
No, it isn't. On our application, if you read that section 10.6 as we put it forward in our application and it's existing in the current regulations, that phrase is not there. And I'm not trying to do this to be contrary in any way. I'm trying to do this so that we all obtain the result that we're all looking for here as an end result, whether we choose to re-adopt 10.6 or we choose to adopt the regulations proposed in the new regulations. The substitute is a substitution.
So you're saying the existing regulations do not include the language, any additions are constructed within the applicable yard requirements or with the approval of commission are not nearer to the lot lines in the existing building?
No, the last phrase, it's there, Steve, and does not increase the nonconformity.
Well, that's what she said. What we sent her was exactly the language in 10.6.
I know, but
So-
you understand my point when I'm trying to tell you, if you include that in there.
Well, that's just her comments, and she has no concerns with it, so it doesn't really matter anyway.
What doesn't matter?
She's not saying there's anything wrong with what you're proposing. She's not against it.
I'll disagree with that, simply because if
NHCOG staff has reviewed this referral and finds no apparent conflict with regional plans or policies or the known concerns of neighboring towns.
all right, but
And that's their job.
But they have a summary of proposed change. That's how they identify it. They block it off.
Well, she shortened your B.
Yeah, she just,
She shortened it. Your B
Summarize.
states, any additions are constructed within the applicable yard requirements or with the approval of the commission are not nearer to the lot lines than the existing
I have no
building.
issue with that, Art. I don't-
And so that's what she's saying, does not
Last
increase the
phrase.
non-conformity.
Well, the last phrase is the point of contention.
Well, I'm not going,
Well,
okay.
well, anyway, what they're gonna vote on is what you propose, so it's,
That's just what I was gonna say.
it's irrelevant.
What you've
Anyway.
got, what you're proposing is to reinstate what's in here in 10.6. There is that other phrase, it's not in here. It's strictly what you have submitted.
Okay.
She just summarized it wrong, that's all, just
All
reword it a
right,
little bit.
the other action that I think that you guys, as a commission, have a problem with, section B of 10.6, where it says any additions are constructed within the applicable yard requirements or with the approval of the commission are not near the lot line. And I think that's the issue that you guys have, is the approval of the commission. If it's not written, you really can't do it. So if you struck out approval of the commission, the issue goes away, in my
Or with the approval of the commission, so who's gonna approve it?
Well, I think that was the issue you had with the approval of the commission. What that does is give the latitude either way that the commission can make those decisions. And I think the issue is if it isn't written, the commission can't do it. So I think if you eliminate with the approval of the commission, I should eliminate or with the approval of the commission. Then it becomes a real regulation where there's no latitude either way. It's a written regulation. It eliminates the problem. I know. It's a lot of thinking. I agree. And I'm just trying to be objective in what I'm soliciting here and what you guys have written in your new regulations, which I don't have a big bone of contention with if the recommendations I gave as a past hearing for that, if you were obliging to change those and make the language understandable, and perhaps give some written demonstrations of how that regulation works. I'm not opposed to that one either. So I'm thinking, what I'm trying to do is say, there's a couple alternatives here. What you're proposing in the new regulations, I don't think is objectionable. The biggest issue was to increase the 18 feet to 25 feet, make the language understandable, so that the average layperson can read it, which I think is something that you guys wanted to do. George brought it up as an issue as well. Perhaps give some delineation and drawings as to how that works. That's also something else that could work. So what I'm trying to do is be open to the hard work that you guys have put into what you were doing in your regulations, in your new regulations, and for what the issue of 10.6 was. Without either one, I think it's very limiting to the folks on Highland Lake of what they can and can't do with their properties. And as I've stated in past hearings, I think the development of Highland Lake in the last 25, 30 years, at least since 1993 when we put the sewers in, has been very presentable. I think people have done a fine job up there, increasing property values, bringing a lot more revenue into the taxpayers, for the taxpayers of this community. And I think that's an important thing. I understand that you guys don't need to consider the dollar issues that are involved in zoning regulations, but I think in the back of everybody's mind, we want to see a set of regulations that makes our community progressive, goes forward in a way that gains a revenue stream with progression that is done in an appropriate way. And I think that we have to recall these things as we move forward. So, and I think that that's what I'm trying to do is suggest that I think there's a couple options here. I think that in your deliberations later this evening, perhaps you could, if you deliberate in the sense that the recommendations that we made in your past hearing, we wouldn't be objectionable to that. As well as the fact that I think the existing 10.6 can be modified to also work in the same fashion. So with that, I don't know if there's any questions the commission has of me. I simply ask that we continue this public hearing to a later date and give you guys time to deliberate on your new regulations. And we can find a middle of the road solution to all this.
State your piece. Anyone else want to speak? You finished? Or?
Well, for now, I just would make the recommendation that leave this public hearing open so that we can continue this after the fact that you guys deliberate on what you're going to deliberate in the new regulations this evening. So I would ask for that. My closing statements.
Does anyone else wish to address the commission?
No questions for me from the commission?
I have none. Point of view, I'll take it.
I have a question, Mick. You're saying that the newer 10.6, if you will, there's you can live with that. Are you asking that from the 10.6, if we were to take your suggestion here of actually replacing the newer version of the 10.6 in the regulations?
Well, I don't have an issue with the proposed regulations that you'll be deliberating on this evening, other than the recommendations that I made during the public hearing for those said regulations. One of the...
You can't really take new information on that, because that's...
No, because it's closed.
Yeah, the hearing's closed, so we have to...
I understand, but
You can-
but the points
Yeah.
of that hearing are there, made by me.
Right.
And if I want to reiterate those, I don't see any problem with that, you know.
Well, they're already in the minutes. I just don't want to get an appeal issue, that's all. So they're in the minutes, we have them. Unless there's something in the proposed 10.6 that's different than this 10.6, you could mention that, but we can't.
Well, that's where I was going with it, because the 10.6, the original 10.6 is not more simplified language, especially if you take out that particular item that you have. The newer 10.6 has the special permitting required after your first bite of the apple, so to speak, to get your 25 or 18 feet. So there's actually a limiting factor with the newer version of this regulation. So I'm just asking
Well, that's why I would prefer we continue this public hearing until after you've deliberated on it, and then, you know, give me the opportunity to see how that works out, and you guys have an opportunity to see how it works out. I've given you what I think would work in the term 10.6.
Issues that the public hearing has been closed on. Correct.
Well, so, yeah, and I think we're okay. We haven't crossed the line, but we just don't want to. It's too up. We don't want to cross the line. We don't want an appeal, or a reason for one, anyway.
So with that, if there's no other questions to the commission, we're done for now.
If you do keep it open after we vote, then you can talk about it all you want. You know, at the next meeting or whatever, if you vote tonight for the other ones. Because then it would be off the table.
And at that time, perhaps, we can make a modification to my application for this hearing to incorporate those facts. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah. Just don't want to talk about the other one.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to put the options out there without
Okay.
I think it's well discussed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any commissioners have any questions or comments?
Anybody else want to testify at all? Or?
On that score?
Well, the only question, not question, the only point, I did review the entire tape from September 20th.
Oh, yeah, we're not talking about that. We still have the hearing
I'm not
open.
going to talk about that.
Okay.
But in that, it was referenced to, well, maybe that is talking about it. All right.
Hold on.
This is a little sticky. It's not a common
Yeah,
situation,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
That's why we're probably better off to just table it until, or continue it until after the other ones.
I'd like to make a motion that we continue this open hearing so that we can have a continued discussion on this.
Is there a second?
To our next regular meeting.
To our next regular meeting.
No second.
I'll make a motion, we close the public hearing.
Second.
Keep it
Any
open.
discussion?
I'd just like to say that originally when this first came to the commission and we voted on it, I actually voted no on that. I was the only member of the commission to vote no. I think that 10-6 has a role to play, and in the way as we've heard from other presentations, the way the lake has formed and based on the small lots. And I'd also mentioned at an earlier time the discriminatory nature for the smaller lot owners, that 10-6 actually affords them some opportunity to basically maximize the use of their property with minimal impact. Whereas the newer version, I still feel, has some flexibility, but not as much as this had. And I think if there's some middle ground that we can achieve to provide the property owners with the most available function and use of their property, I think we should err on the side of the property owners.
Well, there's certainly no harm keeping it open, but that's certainly up to you.
I just, first of all, when this issue came forward, when it was heard to begin with, and it was then eliminated, it was read into the record that there was a comment from our town attorney with regards to the
Indefensible. I was at the meeting, I was the one that made the point.
and in the commission's experience with an application that really pushed the limits, we had a situation with coverage, which this 10.6 doesn't even discuss at all. It's about setbacks. And when you look at the current regulations with regards to coverage, it's parking area, buildings. And at that time, the wetlands officer was there, granted these people the ability to expand their parking area and exceeded his authority to do it, and created a situation where we had a huge amount of coverage in that calculation. They then used that and say that they were going to eliminate some of that parking area and expand their footprint to still accommodate the expansion that they wanted to under the 10.6 guidelines. And, you know, that night, they could have expanded their footprint 90 feet toward the road, and it would have been way out of proportion to what their neighbors had. So when you have a regulation that our town attorney said was so poorly written that it would allow that kind of thing to happen, it's the unpredictability of that. You might as well not have a zoning regulation. And there's a lot of builders that would love to have no zoning regulations. So I think that if there's going to be predictability for buying a piece of property and what you can expect your neighbors to see and have, that's the value of zoning regulations. So it's our job when we go ahead as a arm of the town to go ahead and put a zone in there that we said there was 317 properties and only 17 of them comply with the whole package of the footprints and coverage and so forth. There is a problem, and we have to, I feel, you know, we need to have some kind of a regulation that allows the kind of logical expansion of properties, especially with the improvements at the lake with the infrastructure, the sewer. So I think that that's the importance of this. I think that this 10.6, frankly, has been beaten to the death. I think it was a poor regulation. I've sat on this commission for about 12 years before I went on the Board of Selectmen. I'm back here now on it, and there's nothing that I would like to see happen more than to facilitate growth in this community and the grant list. But it should be something that's predictable and not willy-nilly that anything can happen at any time. Because I think long-term, that devalues property. It doesn't increase value. You might have a short-term thing. I grew up in Berlin. Berlin Turnpike is a total disaster. They can do anything and have done anything they wanted. It would take probably 100 years to ever correct that.
Yeah, but the one thing about the Berlin Turnpike, though, is it generates a lot of revenue for the town of Newington or Berlin. If you look at that, I mean, it's basically...
It also devalues a lot of the abutting properties. And the properties...
The homes.
I mean, you know, we can get into discussions of Berlin Turnpike. But anyways, I think that the way I feel about it, I think that we've got to really make sure that we create in our new regulations something that's going to address I don't think anything that's happened, because there's always the zoning board of appeals that can deal with these kinds of applications, because they're not in harmony with what the zone has been put in there since the 90s. But with the new proposal, which we can't discuss yet, you know, these issues we talked about. So that's why I would say we've listened to the previous public hearing on 10.6. We've listened to Mr. Ham's presentation tonight, which is reiterating, you know, his concern, which I have the same concern, that we don't turn off the spigot as far as development goes to lake. So I think it's clear to me what we have to take some steps to make sure that does not happen. But I think with regards to more comments along the same line that has been presented this the second time, I don't think we're going to gain any ground with it. I think we all understand the importance of dealing with this issue.
Well, I understand it as well, and I'll just, you know, finalize my statement by just saying that, you know, there is a remedy, there is a mechanism in place, even with the current 10.6, that through the public hearing, the neighbors and actually everybody who has standing in the area can come forward and actually...
There's no hearing with 10.6.
Oh, I'm
It's a
sorry.
site plan, there's no hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. But they could actually apply a site plan for that property. And the people in the surrounding area could actually come in and voice their opinion about it and have a working relationship between the neighbors and the applicant, so they could actually adjust the size of the property, the size of the building, whatever it is they're
Is
going
this
to
a
build.
proper conversation for right now?
Well, we're finishing up
No, it's okay. We can
the
talk about it.
10.6, the motion, so it's discussion. So I think if you leave it up to the individuals who are in the area, you do have a mechanism that can actually regulate this.
But with a site plan, there's typically, you can allow a hearing or public input, but that's typically not what happens.
Correct.
You know, unless there's a public hearing with a site with a special permit or something like that,
So
but
it's not a requirement to go ahead and
no.
notify neighbors.
And there's no requirement to notify them
That's my
or
concern with this as well.
put it in the paper or anything.
Dave,
Yes.
did Mark Branson look at our 10.6 besides Kevin?
No,
Some-
I think Kevin,
He just looked at the...
It was just-
he looked at the new ones, he didn't look at the old ones.
Well, that's
Okay.
what I wanted.
Rob shows you what it's all about.
Could you take just about 2 minutes? Could I take a 2-minute break here?
You may take anything you wish.
Oh, yeah. Or the pet grooming.
Just take a 2-minute break.
Yeah, that's okay.
Could he,
I had something to say. I wasn't realized that the meeting, the public portion of the meeting was being closed.
that's what we were discussing, Mike.
I understand, but I was sitting here with my hand up trying to get your attention.
But we'd already had, we were already in the process of a vote.
not trying to be exclusionary.
Because I think we've had enough information. We still need to deliberate on this. And we would then talk about all the things that have been presented. I'm sure you can, you've got a memory of what originally was put in there earlier this year. It's either we agree with this or we don't. And we flush the thing out when we get into full deliberation. So I'd say that's why I just recommend closing the hearing. No, we just had a second. Now we had discussion.
Yeah, second. There's no comment. All those in favor of closing the public hearing? Those opposed? 4-1. I would say we leave this open for the time being and have further discussions at our next meeting.
Well, the hearing's closed.
I realize that,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's deliberation. Excuse
Yeah.
me.
Well, for those of you who didn't attend, and that's everybody, there were only a few people there at that public hearing, 5 or 6. Myself and Mickey were 2 of them. But you've heard it now. Got a rough idea what's happening. It looks like many people will get their way. A lot of the people that came in over the last 4 months and talked to the town manager, the land use director, and everybody else in the town has helped to balance these a little more than perhaps they would have been balanced if we didn't have this effort. We all have to be thankful to Michael Ham because he really has a lot of experience and a lot to offer the town. And he's done a very, very good job over the last 4 or 5 months examining this issue, studying it, talking to many people about it, answering their questions, encouraging them to go to the town hall as well and discuss the problem with the leaders down there. So, we'll know. It's a little early now to say for sure. You can find a copy on the town website of the changes that have been incorporated. I guess they got the copy of the regulations up there, redlined, so you can see what the changes are going to be that were sent to Sean Suter, the consultant. He lives in another state. He'll go over them. He's not going to change the content, I'm told. The content won't be changed by Sean, but he will dress it up with the introduction and the appendix and the index and things like that. And then it'll come back again. His changes will be made public. They have voted for these P&Z regulations to be enforced by November 7th. Whether this will happen or not, I do not know. Depends on what happens with Suter, what kind of changes he recommends. But then they'll become the law. And as we've said all along, once they become the law, they are the law, and you'll have to follow them. Many of the people who were involved in this whole thing don't watch any of these programs. I haven't seen anything in the newspaper about the last P&Z meeting. There might be something in there today or tomorrow. I haven't seen anything so far. The meeting was on Monday, and I'm recording this on Thursday. But this is a difficult subject for most people to understand. They won't understand it unless they're very closely involved because they own a business or they have a residence they want to improve throughout the town, not just at the lake. Mickey was addressing mainly the lake issues, but also other ones too. People came to him from everywhere, of course. Took a lot of his time, took quite a bit of money, and some ups and downs. But he did put together a good case. We couldn't have done better. And it didn't cost the town any money. It didn't cost $50,000 for his input. It didn't cost $50,000 for the input of all the other people that came out of the woodwork and gave their 2 cents. That's good because it balances things. It's not perfect. None of these things are perfect. This is government. Nothing's perfect in government. If you call up any government department in America, you get to run around for about 2-3 hours, so it's very difficult. We get to run around here in Winsted as well. Everything's left up to the resident. They don't really make it too easy for the residents. And they haven't shown any progress. I mean, they'll talk about progress in these meetings. You heard them tonight talking about progress, that we're coming out, we're turning around financially. Well, we're really not. A lot of that's window dressing. A lot of that's good for 15 or 20 years, but not for the next 5 to 10 years, which is the lifetime of most people on that commission, and myself as well. Hopefully, Mickey will live longer. He's kind of young. There are a few young people there. But the whole town now has to get together once these regulations are approved, work together as a team, town manager, all the commission chairmen, the heads of the schools, everybody has to work together to try and make a go of all this. It's not going to be easy. We're in the Rust Belt here. We got an infrastructure that's decaying and needs a lot of money, millions of dollars. We got schools that need a lot of money, millions of dollars. So if you want to hear the whole meeting, I may play some of it next week. We still got a week or two. Maybe I'll split it into 2 weeks and play half of the meeting where they did the rationalization at the last Planning and Zoning regular meeting, Monday night, same night as the public hearing was. They made the decision after that, after about an hour and a half of deliberation. They gave you all their viewpoints. You'll hear that. But if you want to hear it beforehand, you can go to YouTube. I put it up on YouTube, the whole voice recording, so everybody in the world can listen to it. If mainly people that are not here in the wintertime, they're all over the place. They can tune into YouTube. If you want to know how to get it on YouTube, either give me a call or send me an email. Also, it's available in the town clerk's office, what they've done so far, and you can go down there and get a copy of that. It's a lot of pages. And it's, you need some expertise to be able to read it all and put it all 2 and 2 together here. But if you're an engineer or a lawyer, you should be able to do that. Especially if you're a land use engineer or a land use attorney. You should be able to do that. The other thing you can do is you can get a copy of the voice recording. If you bring down a thumb drive, for those of you who know what a thumb drive is, to the land use department, they'll put the voice recording on the thumb drive for you. And you can take it home and play it on your computer or your son or daughter's computers or your grandkids' computers or your great-grandkids' computers if you're not computer literate. But it can be done. I put this up on YouTube as well. If anybody wants to point anybody to that, they can. Anybody in the world, if they're traveling on business or pleasure, they can listen to this program and all the other programs. We're taking a lot of them down from YouTube now because they're kind of history. But I do have the 2 major public hearings up. This public hearing will be up as well. And then we'll see over the next few weeks what Sean Suter has to say. And then we be able to say how much of an improvement this whole effort has made. I think it's made a very good effort. It's going to help a lot of people. Everybody should thank all the people that got involved and took the time to go to the meetings or to go down to the town hall and talk to people. You also have to remember that a lot of the people that do want things are politically part of their team. We have a lot of people in town that they'll listen to it because they're on the same side. If they think somebody's on the other side, then they're not too happy to listen to them. And whether they like to admit it or not, then politics has a lot to play in this. A lot to play. Especially in our town where we have the extremes of the lakes and the town and the old farm country of Winchester. So this is a complex town. It's in a Rust Belt area. A lot of the leaders themselves need to clean up their own properties. The town needs to clean up its own properties. And a lot of the residents want to clean their properties and do things. That's why they're so interested in these planning and zoning changes and what happens with the inland wetlands people and all that kind of thing. So people are interested. They just don't like to get involved. And part of the reason they don't want to get involved is, like Joe Nichols says, there can be retribution if you state your views and you get involved. Now, people are always thanking me for getting involved. It's kind of easy for me to get involved. It's a little harder for Mickey because he has a business here, but it's a little easier for me because I don't rely on any revenue from the town, as I told you in previous programs. I've taken care of my revenue problems over my life and helped a lot of people and will continue to do so. But for a lot of the people in town, this is not their bag. They don't want to get involved in politics. So if you see Mickey on the street or during business or in a restaurant somewhere, thank him for the effort that he's put in and the abuse that he has to take from people who don't agree with him, some are in his own political party or in the other political parties, because politics does play a big role in this whole situation. But I do want you to know that most of the people on the P&Z board and on these other commissions have been on there a long, long time. You heard them on the program say they've been on there 10 years or more. But they haven't improved anything. We've gone downhill over the last 10 years. Now, I'm not blaming them as individuals. They're part of a whole system here that has deteriorated and doesn't seem to understand it and doesn't seem to be able to get a grasp of it and thinks that we're improving much more than we, in fact, we are. As soon as you look at the spreadsheet of the last 12, 13 years of revenue and expenses and the projections for the future, you'll see. And when people say to you, well, we're bringing in this 501(c) that's going to put a lot of feet on the ground and people into the stores, I don't believe them. Because it isn't happening. Every time I look at the Tort Museum parking lot, it's empty. It's going to take forever, 15 to 20 years, to get to the point where we're probably going to be able to balance the situation around here financially. Now, they're like cheerleaders, as you heard during this program, and you'll hear during the next one. They're like cheerleaders. They're trying to get everybody to think that things are improving when they have a losing team. They still have cheerleaders when they have a losing team, and they have cheerleaders when they have a winning team. So right now we got a lot of cheering going on and not much winning. Now I do see some improvements around Highland Lake, where people that used to have old summer cottages are still trying to evolve them into year-round homes. They do the best they can with the small, non-conforming properties that they do have. They try to do the best they can. because they're going to live there year round. They're going to have grandkids coming, some great grandkids, kids, visitors, relatives, friends. That's one of the things about the lake. If somebody rents out a cottage at the lake, there's 50 people there on a weekend having a big party. People say this is a great place to have big parties. So people want to do that. They want to come and enjoy the lake, and taking care of this non-conforming property problem is finally being addressed, I think. It sounds so in the meetings anyway. We'll know for sure when we get the final result. And that people will still be able to do the kind of things they've been doing over the last 20 years to try to improve their properties. And we have Tony Canavo to thank for that when he was chairman of P&Z in the good old days when they were trying to grow the grand list. And they didn't keep saying they weren't interested in money and they couldn't think about money. And down deep, of course, they really are. They're thinking about their own money and their own pocketbooks and who comes into their neighborhood and in their backyard. And in that process, they're not letting you develop in your own backyard. Seems kind of ridiculous and a bit of a oxymoron, paradoxical, if you ask me. But anyway, we're getting towards the end of the program now. If you want to see any of this, go down to the town hall and talk to Steve Sedlowski, the land use director, or even better, Bob Geiger, the town manager. He's excellent. MBA from Harvard, big business experience around the world like Marcia Sterling. Very astute economically. We got a good finance department now, but that's not good enough. The finance department and Bob Geiger and Steve Sedlowski, they need to get the whole team pulling in their direction. They can't be infighting and different philosophies. They have to come up with a plan, not a strategy, but a plan for success. And then they have to manage it by exception. They have to manage it in a manner where they can get things done. So with that, I'm going to sign off now. I'll be back next week, and I'll probably play the first half, if not more, of the deliberation meeting they had at the P&Z regular meeting on the 24th of October, same day as this public hearing was held. I'll try to squeeze in as much as I can. If not, I'll probably have to play it over 2 programs. Maybe I'll play part of it on Monday and the other half on Tuesday, if I get the time to do it, so that you can all get a feel before the 7th of November on what's happening. So with that, I'll sign off. Once again, thank everybody who was involved in this effort. I've taken the signs down now because we don't need anybody else to sign the petition at this point, and we don't need anybody else to go to public hearings. They're over. But I would keep going to the town hall if you can, and try to convince people down there that despite the P&Z regulations, whatever they turn out to be, and they look like they're going to be more balanced than they did 4 months ago, and maybe we're winning a little in that respect, but it's constant communication between the residents. Remember, it's the residents who own the town and run the town, not P&Z. And the town manager's got his hands tied a bit too, because he needs teamwork. He needs to be able to do things in a rational manner and get things done. Otherwise, he's wasting his time. Same with Steve Sedlowski and the same with everybody else. So let's help him. Let's get behind him. Now I'm going to do what many people have asked me to do. Not only am I going to sing the song, but I'm going to show my picture again, because everybody wants to see my picture now that I don't do it anymore. I do these things from home now. I record them at home. I don't even go to the studio except to deliver, to ask questions, seek advice, and to get the things put up on TV. I also put them up on YouTube so anybody, anywhere can see them. Thank you, and good night. See you next week. can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. But if you try sometime, you just might find that you can get what you need.